Before you hear what I'm about to tell you, I need you to understand something. This isn't a story about money, though money is part of it. It isn't really about technology, though that played a role too. It's a story about how the people closest to you can build a cage around you so slowly, so quietly, that by the time you feel the walls, you've already been living inside them for months. We're raised to guard against strangers, against loud threats, against the obvious kind of harm you can see coming from a block away. Nobody sits you down and warns you about the soft kind, the kind that knocks on your door with a casserole dish and a smile and says it's only trying to help. As you listen, I want you to ask yourself one thing. If this were happening to you, would you even know? My name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old, and I'm a retired electrical engineer from Columbus, Ohio. I spent 34 years working for a utility company, the kind of work where you learn fast that you cannot argue with a system. You read the outputs, you trace the problem to its source, you fix it or you don't. There is no negotiating with a faulty circuit. I tell you that because it matters later. I live alone now. My wife, Donna, passed away 3 years ago this past November. Breast cancer. 18 months from diagnosis to the end, and every one of those months felt like a year. After she was gone, the house felt like a building I was just maintaining rather than a home I was living in. I rattled around in it. I kept her plants alive longer than made sense. I still do. My son Marcus lives about 40 minutes away in Westerville with his wife Candace and their 2 kids. He's 36, smart, organized, the kind of person who has a system for everything. After Donna died, he started coming around more often, calling more, checking in. I thought it was grief. I thought he was processing losing his mother and leaning on me because I was what was left. I was glad to have him. I didn't question it. I should have. It started in January, about 14 months ago now. Marcus came over one Saturday with a box under his arm and that easy smile he's had since he was a teenager. He said he'd been thinking about me being alone in the house, about how far the nearest neighbor was, about how I'd had that dizzy spell back in October. He wanted to set me up with a smart home system, a speaker for the living room, a plug adapter in the kitchen that monitored power draw and could be controlled from his phone, a video doorbell. He framed it as peace of mind. His peace of mind mostly, but peace of mind for me too. He said if anything ever happened, he could check in. He said he just wanted to know I was okay. I told him I was fine. I said I didn't need a babysitter. He laughed and said he wasn't babysitting. He was just being a good son. I let him install it. The speaker sat on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. The plug adapter went into the outlet by the recliner in the den, where I charged my phone every night and kept the lamp. The doorbell replaced the old one that had been broken for 2 winters anyway. Marcus walked me through the app on my phone, showed me how to talk to the speaker, showed me how the doorbell sent a notification when someone approached. It all seemed harmless. More than harmless, it seemed thoughtful. The first few months, nothing felt different. Marcus called regularly. He and Candace brought the grandkids over for dinner twice a month. He asked about my health appointments, my finances, whether I'd thought about updating my paperwork now that Donna was gone. I told him I'd get to it. He nodded and let it go, or seemed to. What changed things was a conversation I had with my neighbor Ray in late March. Ray Okonkwo lives 3 houses down. He's a retired telecommunications engineer. Quiet man, doesn't miss much. He was over helping me look at a drainage issue along the back fence, and we ended up at the kitchen table with coffee. I mentioned Marcus had set up the house, pointed at the speaker, made some comment about modern convenience. Ray set his cup down and looked at the speaker for a long moment. Then he asked me something that I've thought about every day since. He said, "Gerald, do you know what that device is actually listening to?" I told him it only activated when I said the wake word. He didn't argue with me. He just looked at me the way a man looks at another man when he's deciding how much truth to offer. Then he said, "That plug adapter by your chair. Who has access to that app?" I said Marcus managed it from his phone. Ray nodded slowly. "You might want to find out exactly what that adapter logs," he said. "Not just power draw." I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I pulled up the adapter's documentation online. It took me an hour to find the right model number, another hour to wade through the technical manual. What I found didn't alarm me outright, but it opened a door I hadn't known was there. The adapter had a firmware version Marcus had installed during setup that was not the factory default. Someone had applied a custom configuration. The device had microphone capability through the speaker integration and could, under certain conditions, relay ambient audio to a paired account. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the screen for a long time. I thought about what I'd said in that room over the past 3 months. Phone calls with my financial advisor about consolidating Donna's life insurance payout. A conversation with my doctor's office about the results of my last physical. 2 hours on the phone with my brother Carl about whether I should sell the property up in Delaware County that Donna and I had bought years ago, intending to build on someday. I thought about Marcus's questions, about updating paperwork, about planning ahead, about making things easier for everyone. Ray came back over that afternoon at my request. I showed him what I'd found. He looked at it carefully, asked a few pointed questions, took some notes on a folded piece of paper. Then he said, quiet as ever, "You need to talk to someone before you do anything else, not Marcus, someone official." I drove to the Columbus Division of Police the next morning on a Tuesday. I asked to speak with someone about a possible surveillance matter. What I got was a detective named Sergeant Paulette Vance, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and the unhurried manner of someone who had seen stranger things before noon. I walked her through everything, the device, the firmware, the access. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Mr. Gerald, how much does your son know about your financial situation?" The question landed differently than I expected. I told her a fair amount. Marcus had helped me set up online banking after Donna passed. He knew I had the life insurance payout sitting in a money market account. He knew about the Delaware County property. He was listed as my emergency contact and had helped me update some basic forms at the hospital after the dizziness in October. Sergeant Vance wrote something down. "Has he ever mentioned power of attorney?" My chest tightened. "Once or twice," I said. "I told him we'd figure it out eventually." She nodded. "Don't do anything yet. Don't confront him. Don't move any accounts. Don't change any devices. Act normal. Can you do that?" Normal. I drove back to Columbus, asking myself what normal even looked like from the inside of something like this. That night, I made myself dinner. Pasta. I ate at the kitchen table with the speaker sitting 3 feet away and pretended I was just a man eating his dinner. I talked to myself the way I always do when I'm alone. I mentioned that I'd been thinking about finally doing something with the Delaware County land, that Carl thought I should sell it before spring, that the number the realtor had quoted was higher than I'd expected. I felt ridiculous. I felt something else too underneath the ridiculous, something cold and mechanical. The same focus I used to feel standing in front of a system that had been misbehaving for weeks and had finally given me a readable signal. 2 days later, Marcus called. "Hey, Dad, random question. Did you talk to someone about the Delaware County property recently? I thought you said you were going to hold on to it." I kept my voice level. "Just thinking out loud," I said. "Nothing decided yet." There was a half-second pause. "Okay, good. I just think you should talk to me before you make any big moves, so we can look at it together." After I hung up, I sat in my car in the garage for 20 minutes. He'd heard me. I called Sergeant Vance that afternoon. She didn't sound surprised. She asked me to write down the date, time, and exact wording of the call and bring it in. She also asked whether Marcus had ever taken me to any medical appointments. I told her he'd driven me to a follow-up after the October incident and had come into the exam room with me. She wrote that down too. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept feeding information carefully. In the den, near the plug adapter, I mentioned being more tired than usual. I said out loud that I sometimes had trouble keeping track of dates. I talked about how the grandkids kept asking me to repeat myself and how I'd been meaning to get my hearing checked. Every word tasted like chalk. Every word was deliberate. Marcus called more often. He started asking specific questions. Had I seen my doctor lately? Was I keeping up with my prescriptions? He mentioned that Candace had noticed I seemed more forgetful at Christmas. He said it gently, with real warmth, with the particular tenderness of someone who knows exactly which words land soft. One evening, he stopped by unannounced with soup, homemade from Candace. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and said he wanted to talk about the future, about planning ahead, about how much easier things would be for everyone, himself included, if we got some paperwork in order. I asked what kind of paperwork. He said the usual things: a healthcare directive, maybe a financial power of attorney, just so someone could act quickly if I ever needed it. He said he wasn't rushing me, just raising it. He said he loved me and wanted to make sure I was taken care of. I told him I appreciated that. After he left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, looking at the soup on the stove. The next morning, I went down to the basement to look for the file box where I keep important documents. I have a system down there, labeled, organized, the same way I've done things my whole life. I found what I was looking for within 5 minutes. But while I was looking, I noticed something tucked behind my tax files in the back of the bottom drawer. A manila envelope, newer than everything else around it, with no label. Inside were printed documents, forms, legal language in the kind of clean professional font that's meant to look official without quite being official. I read every page standing in the basement under the fluorescent light, with the furnace cycling on and off behind me. Healthcare power of attorney, a form authorizing an agent to make medical decisions on behalf of a principal deemed unable to make those decisions independently. Financial power of attorney, a worksheet listing assets with handwritten notes in Marcus's handwriting, numbers, account estimates, the Delaware County property listed with an approximate value. Below it, a single notation, confirm before filing. There was also a printed email, 1 page, folded once, an exchange between Marcus and a lawyer named Terrence Webb dated 6 weeks prior. In it, Marcus described me. He used the phrase showing signs of cognitive slippage. He mentioned the October dizziness. He mentioned that I sometimes lost the thread in conversation. He asked about the process for establishing guardianship for a parent who was not yet incapacitated but trending in that direction. I sat down on the basement steps and read that phrase 4 times. Not yet incapacitated, but trending in that direction. I thought about every conversation we'd had in the last year, every dinner, every phone call about my health, my finances, my property, every time he'd been in the exam room with me, every gentle question about whether I was keeping up, staying sharp, managing okay. I thought about the speaker on the counter and the adapter by my chair and the doorbell logging every person who came to my door. I called Ray that afternoon. I didn't tell him everything on the phone. I just asked if he could come over. He was there in 20 minutes. I showed him the envelope. He read it in silence. When he finished, he set it down carefully on the table, the way you set something down when you want to be deliberate about it. "Gerald," he said, "you need a lawyer. Today." I called Sergeant Vance first. She told me to photograph every page before I moved anything, put the originals back exactly as I'd found them, and not say a word to Marcus. She said she'd been in contact with a financial crimes unit and that this was no longer just a surveillance question. The lawyer I found was a woman named Patricia Hollis, recommended by a colleague from my working years. We met the following morning. I brought the photographs. She looked at them for a long time, then looked at me over the top of her glasses and said, "Mr. Gerald, you are not losing your mind, but someone has been working very hard to convince a paper trail that you are." She told me what to do and what not to do. She told me not to sign anything, not to let Marcus accompany me to any more medical appointments, and to get an independent cognitive evaluation as soon as possible. She said that last part mattered more than people realized. She said courts and institutions still trusted documentation, and I needed documentation that didn't come through Marcus. I scheduled the evaluation for the following week. In the meantime, I kept the performance going. I wore the weariness. I mentioned appointments I was having trouble tracking. I talked near the adapter about needing to update some paperwork and not knowing where to start. Marcus called within 2 days to offer help. He said he'd found a notary. He said Candace could come with me for support. He said it was nothing to be embarrassed about, needing a little help staying organized. I thanked him. I said I'd be in touch. The cognitive evaluation came back clean. Not just adequate. Clean. The examiner noted strong executive function, above average verbal recall, and what she described as highly intact organizational reasoning. She gave me a copy of the report, and I drove straight from her office to Patricia Hollis and handed it to her. She smiled for the first time since I'd met her. Over the following 2 weeks, Patricia coordinated with Sergeant Vance and the Financial Crimes Unit. The bank where I held my accounts was notified. The device manufacturer was contacted about the unauthorized firmware configuration. Sergeant Vance's team obtained records of the account that had been paired to my plug adapter. Those records showed an access log. They showed dates, times, and duration. Months of it. One morning, Patricia called me and said, "We're ready." The meeting was held at the bank. A conference room on the second floor with a long table and a window that looked out over the parking garage. Present were Patricia, Sergeant Vance, a representative from the bank's fraud prevention office, and, arriving last, Marcus and Candace. Marcus came in looking the way he always looks when he's prepared, composed, a folder under his arm. He saw Sergeant Vance and his expression shifted just slightly, like a card player who's been dealt something unexpected but isn't ready to show it yet. He looked at me. I nodded. I didn't say anything. The bank representative, a man named David Shue, opened the meeting. He explained that the institution had been made aware of several inquiries about my accounts in recent months, some of which had been initiated without my knowledge or authorization. He asked Marcus directly whether he had contacted the bank on my behalf. Marcus said yes. He said he was trying to help. He said I had asked him to look into some options. I said nothing. David Shue turned a page. He noted that in one of those calls, Marcus had mentioned that his father was experiencing memory difficulties and was considering granting financial authority to a family member. He asked whether I had authorized Marcus to represent my cognitive state in that way. Marcus said he was only repeating what I had told him. Sergeant Vance spoke. She said she'd like to clarify a few things. She placed a folder on the table. She described the device configuration, the access log, the dates, the duration. She explained what the log showed. She didn't raise her voice. She spoke the way a person speaks when they have everything they need and know it. Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's a misunderstanding," he said. "The device was set up for safety. Dad agreed to it." Sergeant Vance said, "Mr. Marcus, the access log shows 214 sessions over 11 months. A safety check does not require 214 sessions." Candace looked at her hands. Patricia placed the photographs of the documents on the table. The power of attorney forms, the email to Terrence Webb, the phrase "not yet incapacitated but trending in that direction." Marcus stared at them. He looked at me. "Dad, this is not what it looks like." I said, "Then tell me what it looks like." I said, "Then tell me what it looks like." He opened his mouth. He closed it. He tried 3 different starting points, and each one died before it became a sentence. What came out finally was something about stress, about the cost of the kid's school, about how he'd been watching me since his mother died, and he was scared. He was genuinely scared that he'd lose me too, and that the property and the money sitting idle wasn't safe. I listened to all of it. When he finished, I said, "You could have told me you were scared." The room was quiet after that. Sergeant Vance said there would be a formal investigation into the unauthorized device configuration and the misrepresentation made to the financial institution. She said any attempt to proceed with guardianship filings or contact my accounts going forward would be treated as interference with an ongoing matter. She asked Marcus and Candace to come with her. Candace was crying. Marcus stood up slowly, like a man who'd been sitting for a very long time and wasn't sure his legs would work. At the door, he turned back to look at me. I didn't look away. He left without saying anything else. Patricia gathered her folder. David Shue shook my hand. I sat there for a moment after everyone else had started moving, looking at the empty table. Then I stood up, put on my coat, and walked out. It was cold in the parking garage. The kind of cold that finds the spaces between your collar and your neck. I stood next to my car for a while, not doing anything in particular, just breathing. When I got home, the house was exactly as I'd left it. Same kitchen, same counter, same speaker sitting next to the coffee maker. I unplugged it. I unplugged its adapter. I boxed up the doorbell. I put all of it in a garbage bag and set it by the back door. Then I made a pot of coffee and called Carl. I told him everything. He was quiet for most of it. When I finished, he said, "Gerald, I should have come out there more." I told him he couldn't have known. That was true, and also not the point, and we both understood that without saying so. In the weeks that followed, I did the things Patricia had told me to do. I updated my will. I established a trust. I changed every account password and added an independent financial advisor as a secondary contact on my accounts, not a family member. I had the house swept for any other devices Ray didn't recognize. There were none. I got new locks. The investigation moved forward. I don't know where it will end, and I've stopped trying to predict it. What I know is that a line was crossed, and it was crossed deliberately, and there is documentation of every inch of it. Marcus is not called. I don't know what we are to each other right now. Some part of me understands how fear does things to people, how grief does things, how the combination of the two can lead a person down a road they'd have sworn they'd never take. Understanding that doesn't make it clean. It doesn't make the betrayal smaller. It just means I can carry both things at the same time, the grief and the anger, without letting either one make my decisions for me. Ray came over last week. We sat at the kitchen table, same chairs as before, new coffee maker because the old one finally gave out. He asked how I was doing. I told him I was okay, getting there. He nodded. "You read the output," he said. "You traced it to the source." He was right. That's the only way I know how to do things. Here's what I'll leave you with. I am 63 years old. I have all my faculties. I spent 34 years reading systems that didn't announce when they were failing, and I got good at it because I paid attention. I almost missed this one. Not because I wasn't smart enough. Because I wasn't smart enough. Because I wanted to believe the person I loved was acting out of love. That is not a weakness. That is what it means to be human. But I'm telling you now, from the other side of it, trust your instincts when something feels managed. When the help comes too often and asks too many questions and always seems to arrive right after the conversation you just had in your own home. When someone who loves you keeps a file on your lapses but not your strengths. Your name on your own accounts means something. Your signature means something. The right to speak for yourself, to be in the room, to have the conversation without someone there to interpret you, that means everything. You are not a burden for protecting those things. You are not difficult for asking questions. You are not paranoid for noticing when the people around you seem to know more about your life than you have told them. Pay attention. Take notes. Get your paperwork in order yourself with a professional who works for you and no one else. And if someone is always offering to help, always volunteering to be in the room, always gently suggesting you might be slipping, slow down. That kind of help sometimes is help. And sometimes it is something else wearing the same face. If this story left you uneasy, that feeling is worth listening to. These things survive in silence and in the small assumptions we make about the people we love. They fall apart the moment someone decides to read the output instead of just accepting that the system is fine. Thank you for listening to Voices of Uncle Walter. If this story reached you, share it with someone it might reach even further. And I'll see you in the next one.